Rowe, and we're here in the Jazz Archive at Hamilton College with our guest Carol Bash, Hamilton alum and documentary filmmaker. And I was pleased to be able to show your film for one of the first times, even though it's not quite done, but it was a great experience for us.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you. It's great to be here. Thanks, Mom.
It's nice that you're focusing on Mary Lou Williams and a person who doesn't show up in the history books as often as she should. Is that something that drove you to do this?
Yeah, absolutely. When I first came to Mary Lou, basically it was through her music. And I was at my in-laws' house. My husband is also a Hamilton alum. But anyway, I was in their house, and my father-in-law was playing Mary Lou Williams on the stereo, and I just was bowled over by her music. And I asked him, who is this playing? And he said, Mary Lou Williams. She's one of the greats. And I was like, I never heard of her, and I knew jazz, I knew the names, but I had never heard of her. And when a book came out about her life, I'd say a year or so later, I read about this woman. I was just so fascinated about her life and her life story, and kind of sad about the fact that I had really never heard of her, and just decided then that I was going to try to change that through telling her story through film.
Yeah, it's serendipitous that book came out to sort of like the planets aligned a little bit for you. I found it interesting when I have to admit too that I didn't know enough about her, and when your film came up, and then I took out some music to listen to, and her solo piano playing had a touch of really raw, basic blues, almost like to the point of, I almost felt like she was even an older soul, playing stuff from the turn of the century almost. It was very interesting.
Well, that's her philosophy. Her philosophy is about jazz, is that it came from the blues, it came from the suffering of black people. And she said, without the blues, there's no jazz. So it's all about the blues for Mary Lou, and it just resonates throughout, no matter what style she's playing, because she plays so many styles. But whatever it is, she still has that blues kind of heavy duty, rhythm and beat to her music. That makes you swing.
Yeah, and she swung.
Yeah, she did.
Was it always your intention to find a way to make a living a little bit off the beaten path?
I think so. Yeah, I was never one to sort of say, oh, I want to be that banker. I was never a business-oriented 9-to-5 kind of person. I was always interested in writing or photography, something visual. So yes, I guess you could say I was a creative kind of soul, and knew that whatever I ended up doing would have to be somewhat creative.
And for students nowadays, what's the best avenue if they want to be a filmmaker? I mean, you got a master's in New York.
From the New School.
And is that master's sort of broad media-based study?
The media studies master's that I got really helped to get me more informed about cinema history. I also was very interested in production, meaning actually how to hold the camera, how to edit, the hands-on nuts and bolts of production that I didn't get from my previous experience working in news. You weren't allowed to touch the equipment in news because it was union. So, yeah, I basically realized that to get that kind of experience, I needed to go back to school. But as far as getting into the business, there's so many different avenues. There's actually no one great way. it just is varied. Whether it's knowing somebody and just sort of falling into it and learning on the job, that's fine. You don't have to go to school to do what I do. You can get this experience learning on the job as well. It's
like how people used to learn to play jazz
exactly
on the bandstand.
right, because school is a great foundation, but for some people, but really you're going to learn this job by doing it.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to make those mistakes in the field. I would say the one key thing that helped me tremendously was having a really great mentor. And I was lucky enough to be working with a veteran filmmaker, Stanley Nelson. And he really has been my mentor throughout this process. I worked with his company, Firelight Media, for a good 6 or 7 years. And it was through working with that company that I got to try on different roles in production to sort of get that broad-based experience. But he was the one that was sort of always saying, try this, giving me advice whether I wanted it or not. So I would suggest to anyone that's interested in this is to look up someone whose work you really admire and try to cultivate a relationship with that person.
Mm-hmm. Good advice. I was curious about if your film is Mary Lou Williams your first solo effort.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yes.
So is there a script, first of all, for the film?
Yes. Yes.
Is the script driven by the available resources that you can find?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yes. One thing, that I'm trying to do with the film is to tell her story through her words. And so what we did, my team and I, in researching her was to basically extract all the written words through her unpublished autobiographies, oral words through radio interviews. She did an oral history, video interviews. So it's basically just extrapolating everything that she has said, whether on print or on media, and creating a script based on that. So yes, the script are her words, telling her story, chronologically, basically. Mm-hmm. And I'd say the challenge in that is that Mary Lou, well, the good thing is that we did take various different kinds of source materials, because what she said later on in life on video was kind of very scripted for her. She knew exactly what her history was, and she wasn't straying from that. But she was very much more open, maybe in the 1950s, talking to a reporter. So we would use that. It was really hunting down real nuggets.
Is that what some of your interns do when your researchers, or you mostly do that yourself?
I usually do that myself,
mm-hmm.
And I have to be honest, my editor and my editor is actually a co-writer on this. We both were going through, while she should be editing instead, we're going through articles and, oh, look what she said here. Oh, look at this quote. This is a good one, And so the both of us really kind of built, her story and tried to build the drama of her story,
mm-hmm.
Through the script.
And what about the M word, the money word? Is that like I can sort of envision, trying to make a budget, and in the back of your mind you're going,
right.
There's always going to be these hidden things that I'm not going to know about until they get there.
Right.
And then they won't be accounted for.
Well, the M word. The M word is, I try to make as realistic a budget as I can. And, you know, how it works, or how it's worked with this film, basically, is that you never get all of what you need at one time. It's always a matter of, you get a grant for, you know, X amount of dollars, and that will take you but so far, and you use up that money. And then you just keep applying for grants, or, you know, individuals. You basically are always fundraising to finish the project. It just so happens most recently I got a very large grant that will really that allowed me for several months to really work on this full time and not fundraise. But I'm coming to the end of that money too,
Mm-hmm.
and I still need more.
Mm.
So it'll be back to, you know, the proposal writing and all of that. And honestly, you know, the budgets that you give to foundations, it's a catch-22. If you really told them how much you really need, they probably wouldn't fund you. So you always have to sort of be conservative with the figures you give out to make it seem like it's something that they would be interested in funding.
Yeah.
It's a game.
So you definitely don't want to pad your budget because you have a feeling that I'm not thinking about something that I'm going to have to fund. But if you make it too big, then they won't look at it.
Right, right. I mean, you pad your budget a little bit, but yes, it's never. But yes, you're never being really realistic with how much you really need, because it's expensive. And a funder will look at it and say, they won't understand, they're not filmmakers, that how come this budget is it's so expensive?
Yeah.
Do you really need this much money?
Mm-hmm.
So they'll just go to the next documentary or next project that they think can be funded with less money.
Here's a question you probably couldn't answer, but if you had a very wealthy backer who said, you know what, I'm just going to keep funding this as long as you want. Might you never finish the film?
Mm-mm. Oh God, that would be heaven.
I mean, there's something about running out of money
Right.
that makes you say, well, I've got to finish this.
Right, exactly. There is an end game to this if you run out of money, definitely. If I had a wealthy backer, and if you know anybody, please. But no, because, no, you know, at the end, I want this film to get finished. I want the film to be completed. I want Mary Lou's legacy to get
Yes.
out there. I want this film to go on to its next journey and get out there in the world. I mean, I don't want to be a perpetual, you know, first-time filmmaker. I want to move on. Mm-hmm.
And how does it get out there in the world? You mentioned that that PBS is a potential market for the film, and then there's overseas. How do you make all that happen?
Well, with the chunk of money that I basically got quote unquote completion funding for the project, and that was through PBS. And part of getting that money was the understanding that it will, when it is finished, it will be broadcast on public television. So once it gets to a certain point, probably the next phase, the fine cut, this entity, my funder, will take the project and pitch it to the different PBS series. And they will decide, you know, where it's going to end up on PBS. So my contract is specifically for this program to be broadcast on PBS. But as far as international, what happens is that I would also look for an agent, maybe a sales agent or a distributor that would be interested in approaching foreign broadcasters for that kind of broadcast abroad. I'm also interested in it going onto the film festival circuit. That would
Yeah.
be just applying.
Yeah.
But more importantly, what I really wanted to do is for it to live in the educational setting, whether through libraries or schools or universities or arts organizations, because I really see this program as being sort of a tool for community outreach and inspiring young people and bringing awareness to jazz education.
Mm-hmm.
So that's really the mission, I
Right.
think, of the film, to sort of keep it moving forward in the community.
Remind me after we're done to tell you about the Jazz Education Network
Okay.
annual gathering. It might be a
Mm-hmm.
good possibility.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, fairly recently, I also had an interview with another documentary filmmaker, Burl Crone.
Oh, yes.
And Burl said a couple things that I wanted to ask you about. He said when he was first getting into it and he finally got a camera in his hands, how exciting that was. But the real camera person said, shooting is one thing, but it's really the lighting. That's the art. I see you nodding your head.
Mm-hmm. Yes, absolutely. Yeah, the art of photography is the lighting. It's how you sculpt what's in front of the camera through manipulating the lighting. So it's an art and it's a craft. I am a camera person too. I can hold a camera and compose a decent shot, but I am not a director of photography. I hire those people who have that eye and that sensibility and really understanding of the different light sources and how to manipulate the light to create a beautiful image in front of the camera. Yes. He's right.
Okay. It makes me wonder about my light in here now.
Oh, well.
He also
you
said
get it done, Monk.
he also said you can rescue bad video, but you can't rescue bad sound.
He's so right. Well, of course, he's a veteran.
Uh-huh.
He knows this is absolutely right. People will forgive a bad image, if it's out of focus or it's not quite composed right. That's okay if they can hear the content, but you can't if it's really unsettling to the ear. You're not gonna focus in. You're actually probably going to be a little bit repelled by that because it's very sensitive. Your hearing is very sensitive, and so it's critical that when you're shooting something, that the sound is really the best quality it can be.
Yeah, it makes me think about the times I've done some recording, and if there's a moment in the recording where you feel like you need to explain something to the listener, you know that's not good. Like, yeah, I know the bass player made a mistake there. Like, if you have to explain it, then
right. Yeah, and it's so funny because a lot of filmmakers, it's always about the visual and the picture, and the sound is really like the stepchild. But it really is, the sound is so much more important in the end for the listener than the visual.
Now, do you own your own gear to some extent?
I have a basic camera. I have like a Sony PD-150. It's out of date now. It's a mini DV camera. And I have a very basic lighting kit. Because, I can shoot. I can compose a shot, and quite honestly, in those situations, in this documentary, there were times when I didn't have the money, and yet I wanted to interview somebody, whether they were moving on in years, or they were in a location that I could get to, and I didn't have the money, so I shot. with my PD 150 and my basic lighting kit, and it works. It works. But believe me, when I have the money to pay for a professional, I pay for a professional.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Some things have gotten cheaper. I mean, less expensive. Like you probably do. Do you have an editing machine or suite or something that instead of paying a company $300 or $400 an hour?
Well, that's the other thing. I mean, just, yes, I have Final Cut Pro on my laptop. But I'm not an editor. Again, editing is a craft. I have an editor who's fantastic, and what she does and how she paces out the visual and the audio and creates a mood through the materials is something that I couldn't do. It's really a craft. She went through the channels of apprenticeship and sitting at the heels of well-known editors. I mean, she has been doing this for decades. So I'm not going to presume that I could come in there, even if I have the software, that I'd be able to edit like that.
Yeah, that is a danger. Too many people have the toys now, and they think that
right.
Yeah, I can make a record now because I have the
right. I mean, and there's nothing wrong with doing it yourself. But I think you have to be humble in that process. I do think you can't do it all yourself. I think like a film suffers if you're doing everything. You really do need outside eyes to sort of help you with the material, and so because you can't see objectively. But yeah, and but sometimes it calls for as I said, if the financing's not there, you got to go out there and shoot, or you don't have the money and you can edit, you got to do what you got to do. But I totally believe that the best way is to just get somebody who really has that real fine sense of craft to help you with your film.
Yeah. Let's talk about Mary Lou a little more. One thing I noticed about her words and the words you used in the film is that she didn't blame the downsides of her career on the social issues very much. She didn't complain if I had been a white woman or if I had been a man, or I didn't hear that a lot, and I thought that was very interesting.
Yeah, she never she never felt, from what I've read, that being a woman held her back. Whether I agree with that is one thing, but I mean, she always said that she always compared herself. She always thought of herself as being just as fine a musician as one of the guys. She knew her art, and so she never allowed that to stand in her way. So yeah, so she was not one to say, "Oh, only I had been a man, I would have done this. I could have been better, or I could have gone beyond this boundary." She didn't really see herself that way. She just kept forging forward. Now, that doesn't mean that that's the case. I mean, I kind of do feel that had she been a man, it would have been a different situation for her on some levels. But she didn't see it that way, I don't think. Yeah.
She very well could have, if she was a he, gone out and had her own band. I mean, that would have been a standard thing in the industry. Like someone becomes sort of a star within a band, and then the next logical step to have my own big band or whatever.
And I also feel that it's just in reading the critics, and how her music was looked at. She was always kitten on the keys and girl piano player.
Or as I think it was her husband said, she played just like a man.
Right, right. Right. And she herself said that too.
Really?
So I mean, indirectly you're acknowledging that yes, it's a man's world out there,
Yeah.
and you're a woman in it.
Mhm.
And you're going to be seen, no matter how great your craft and your artistry, you're being seen on that standard. So that means yes, you are fighting that battle, whether you acknowledge it
Mhm.
or choose to ignore it or go around it. You're still dealing with it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You mentioned Ken Burns,
Mhm.
or someone asked you about Ken Burns, I guess. And did you have an opinion about his big long history that he did of jazz?
Well, of course, I saw all. Well, for one thing, my editor edited two of his.
What's her name?
Sandra Christie.
Okay.
Sandra Christie. She edited two of the programs of
Hmm.
his series. I actually enjoyed the series. I mean, clearly there are some figures left out, but
Yeah.
you can't do it all.
Right.
And I'm glad actually that he left out Mary Lou. To an extent. He mentioned her, so that means that somebody else has to take up that torch.
Yeah.
I think there was a lot of focus on. It would have been interesting had maybe he gone a little bit more into the contemporary jazz movement.
Mhm.
I mean, it was very much more focused on the 30s and the 40s and the 50s.
Right.
It would have been interesting, but I think, all in all, I did enjoy the series.
Mhm.
I think he did a fine job.
Yeah. Overall,
Mhm.
it's a very
Yeah.
useful tool.
Great writing.
Mm-hmm.
Great writing.
Have you met him? Is he like? I was going to say, is it an oxymoron to say
Uh-huh.
that there's such a thing as a well-to-do documentary filmmaker? Maybe he's the one.
You're right. Look, between Ken Burns and Michael Moore, God bless them.
Yeah.
Really,
Right.
I am just not mad at him for being successful.
Yeah.
He has it. He has that funding. He has that backing. He has PBS that is just, loving everything that he comes out with, and he's able to do these long format historical documentaries. Good for him.
Yeah. Right.
Good for him.
Yeah, I feel sometimes that people that complain about it, it may be a bit of professional jealousy there.
Oh, of course it is. Of course it is.
It's the same with musicians too.
I have met Ken Burns, and I've met his brother, Rick Burns. They're brilliant.
Uh-huh.
They're brilliant. And very nice in person. They're really very
Yeah.
nice men.
Yeah.
He wouldn't remember me, but
Uh-huh.
yeah.
What is there anything that your time at Hamilton led you down this path?
When I was at Hamilton, I think I was much more focused on writing.
Mm-hmm.
So it was just a reaffirmation for me that no matter what I was going to do, it was going to be something creative.
Yeah.
I think what I learned in Hamilton was storytelling. Even though I was an English major and again I was focusing much more on writing, it was what makes a story, and really learning, through obviously reading the literature and dissecting and constructing, deconstructing the writings of, great masters. It really, it helped me to develop a sort of a critical analysis of what people are gravitated to when they sit down to read a book, or what I as a writer have to sort of bring out to the audience so that they are compelled to read what I write. It all has, and that helped me as far as in making people understand, in crafting a story, even on film, that it's the audience that counts, and what is it about the story that's going to move people.
Well said.
Okay,
Well said.
thank you.
Yeah, I was lucky enough to have my daughter go here too, and you know, I think it's a great place to go, and
Yeah.
people turn out pretty well.
They do, and I think, you know, the English department, you know, when I was here, there were excellent professors, and I just assume that the professors are the same as far as just being very serious about their work, and you know, dedicated, and really imparting that to the students.
Yeah. And your father went here.
He did.
He was one of the few black students at the time. Did you say early 50s?
In that class of 1951.
Wow.
Yeah, James Bash.
And where we're sitting didn't even exist, of course.
Didn't even
It was probably a forest.
Right, exactly. It was all just the old side of the campus, Hamilton. It was all men.
Yeah.
You know, I couldn't imagine, you know, what that would be like.
Right.
This is pre-civil rights movement.
Right.
You know, so, and you know, honestly, he's proud of Hamilton. He's very proud of being a Hamilton alum. But he doesn't really talk much about his college years. And I don't know if it's uncomfortable or there's some things he kind of wants to keep to himself. Maybe it was hard. I can imagine it was difficult.
Yeah.
So
my impression of reading
Yeah.
about those times is that Hamilton was not necessarily on the forefront of change. So I could understand that.
Yeah, so I don't really know much about his college years. He kind of keeps that to himself, and I feel like I don't want to push him.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now you said you're in your sort of 9th year of the Mary Lou Williams film, so obviously you work on other things at the same time. In fact, I quoted you.
Oh, okay.
You have a whole folder full of ideas.
Oh. Oh, those are for my upcoming documentaries.
Yeah.
Right. Right now, I really am just focused on Mary Lou because I have, you know, the completion funding. So that's actually another one of the stipulations of this, that I only work on this one project 100%.
Wow. Yeah.
So that's great. But yes, I definitely am looking towards the future. Mary Lou will get out there in the world. And I do have some ideas for my next documentary. But I don't, it looks like I'm drawn to yet another figure, another woman. Not that that's going to be my career as far as, but I do have someone in mind. But I haven't approached the estate yet or anything, so I don't feel like I can really talk about it.
In fact, I had that word written down on my little sheet here, the estate word.
Yes.
Does that get difficult sometimes?
I think, well, luckily for this project, no. You know, I approached her, Mary Lou Williams' executor, and he was very open and has been very supportive. But it can be, you just don't know what, until you meet these people or a person or whoever, you just don't know what you're dealing with.
Yeah.
You know, what they're expecting or what they want to present as far as that person's legacy and how that might counter what you want to do as a filmmaker.
Right.
So, you know, there's a discussion that needs to take place, and until you have that, you really, I don't want it. You gotta kind of keep it under wraps.
I wonder if it was sort of to your advantage that she didn't have children, because sometimes I think the kids and the grandkids think that there's lots of money to be made from granddaddy's,
right.
past.
Right. Oh wow, documentary's gonna make millions of dollars. Yeah, family can complicate matters. I mean, she does have family,
Mhm.
you know. I mean, and she does have half sisters who are still alive,
Okay.
and nieces and nephews. But she was very clear that her money goes to her foundation, and it's Father Peter O'Brien who's the head of her foundation. So, you know, it was dealing with him. You know, again, it's a discussion. It depends on what people's mindsets are, and sometimes, yes, if the children are involved, what was the relationship with their parents, you know, or that person, you know, it can get kind of complicated.
Yeah. What about was all the music in the film Mary Lou's music?
Mm-hmm.
Or, well, some of it was stuff she had arranged, perhaps.
Yes, exactly. What I intend to do is the music in the film is either going to be music that she composed, performed, or arranged.
Mm-hmm.
So one of those three things. She touched it on one of those levels. Yeah, that's the intent, that all the music you hear is somehow credited to her on some level.
And do you have assistance with that? In fact, I think we had talked about your
Mm-hmm.
music clearance person that you've worked with. And
Right.
that's a whole other ball game, too.
That's
isn't
a
it?
whole other ball. It's a whole other. You're getting right into the gut here among your questions. Yeah, music clearance, you know, is just a whole other ball of wax, because it's tracking down the copyright owners and the publishers of all these music compositions, and that is so difficult a task at times, because it's not that you almost need to have somebody on board that really knows this stuff. So it just behooves me to hire a music supervisor,
Mm-hmm.
someone who really understands the music legalities and contracting and negotiating and all that. There's no way I would ever want to do that, or have my associate or my co-producer do that. It's just too time consuming, and you just need someone that really has that expertise.
And are you able to, at what point do you put that in your funding applications? How do you,
Mm-hmm.
you know what I mean, because you don't necessarily know what music you're going to use from the get-go.
Mm-hmm. Well, what I would do is, initially I always had a music supervisor in mind,
Mm-hmm.
someone who, you know, has a really good history of working with other filmmakers who I admire. And actually, this woman, Rena Kozerski, my music supervisor, was a huge fan of Mary Lou Williams. So, although she ended up not being my music supervisor, she's now working with the foundation. What I did was make a phone call to her and say, you know, how much money, you know, should I put in the budget for music? You know, so basically it might not be the most accurate figure, but it's based on her knowledge and her expertise, and so that figure goes into the budget.
I see.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. It's rocket science.
No, it's not. No. Don't say that about those rocket scientists. They really are rocket scientists.
Yeah, right.
I am not.
But isn't someone told me your interns said your husband is an inventor?
He
Wow,
is.
you guys have chosen some interesting careers.
I know. Why?
That's right.
Yeah. He's an entrepreneur. You know,
Wow.
Myron Alexander is my husband, and also a Hamilton alum, same class as mine, 85.
Uh-huh.
And he basically is a medical device developer, inventor. He invents medical devices.
Oh.
Yeah, so that's what he does, and he's trying to get his product out on the market as well this
Mm-hmm.
year. So he also was a teacher, and he worked with youth as in human services. So I mean, that was his day job. But now he really is devoting all of his time to his development of new products. So yeah, another creative
Nice.
entrepreneur,
Mhm.
you know, uncharted path person.
Yeah. Great.
Yeah.
Never a dull moment in your
Never a
life.
dull moment and never enough money.
Well, here's a purely opinion question on my part. And it's April 2012. I'm wondering what's your feeling about our country at the moment?
Wow. I'm kind of disheartened by what I hear as far as the politics are concerned. You know, just the level of animosity, you know, between, you know, what's going on in our government, the Republicans and the Democrats, and not being able to really come together and I think legislate for the populace, for the people. You know, of course I'm thrilled that there's a black man in the White House, President Obama.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I definitely have supported, you know, a lot of the initiatives that he's put on the table. But I also am understanding there is a minefield that he kind of had to sort of go around in trying to reach across the aisle to work with Republicans. So, you know, it's, I do believe he will become the president. He will maintain, you know, the presidency or the election. You know, I don't see a Republican having that pass to the presidency at this point. So on that level, I feel optimistic.
Good.
I feel optimistic. Yeah.
I think you're right.
Mm-hmm.
It seems like the Republicans in too much of the country have this added impetus to gain back the office, not just because they don't just like his policies, but because of what he is. And it seems very troubling that you know, 3 years ago we thought that there would be this bringing together, and instead it feels like it's gone the other way. Yeah.
It's a pulling apart, but I feel it on a certain level, you know, those tactics have backfired, you know, because it's so confrontational and oppositional that I think it's just turned people off, you know. And the Democrats clearly have this. I mean, I think the Democratic people are definitely supporting the president, so there's no question there. Yeah, so I mean, I think eventually he will become a president for a second term, and things will get better.
I like getting political predictions on film.
Oh, really?
I did it once with John Hendricks.
Oh, what did he say?
He said, well, this was way back. God, this was 12 years ago. And he said, the Republicans are dead in the water, and they just don't know it. It turned out he was sort of right, but not as soon as he wanted to be.
Right,
that was a few extra years.
Right. Well, I think they really are definitely, you know, drumming their demise. They're so right on the extreme that it's just, I don't see.
You should keep that in mind, what you just said, drumming their demise. You can use that somewhere. I know that's a really good little phrase. I like that.
Okay, well, I think they are.
Yeah. Well, it's been such a pleasure to have you here, and I know that we got some nice response. I have a feeling you'll be back.
Oh yes, I hope
not,
so.
And not just to visit, but to present your
the
work again.
the
Yeah.
final project,
Yeah,
the
yeah.
real film,
Right.
right? I would love to.
Yeah.
I would love to. Thank you, Mark. It's great being here and talking.
Best of luck, and thank you for what you do. We need you, creative people out there, taking on these kind of projects.
Thanks, Mark.
All right. Best wishes.
Thanks.